Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about how to write an effective AP caliber vocabulary definition. Now, plenty of my former students over the years would argue that I assigned vocabulary IDs to torture them and make their lives absolutely miserable, but I think that IDs provide a very useful service in helping students study for AP exams and go a little bit deeper on the knowledge. So what we're going to talk about here a little bit is how to do that. So, why are IDs important? First of all, they help you remember the very basics of a vocabulary term, the who slash what, the when, the where, and the why. The most important thing about IDs to me, though, is that they emphasize the why. They emphasize why a particular thing is important to the scope of history. Like, why are we actually studying that? And those are the things that really come in handy when you're writing an essay on an AP exam, for example, or answering one of those multiple choice questions about the importance of a particular event. The why is what's going to help you with that. They do allow you to go into more detail than you would typically get. The very nature of AP courses often dictate that you just don't have the opportunity to go into detail on everything during class. There's just not enough hours in the day. IDs help you pick up the slack where we just can't go into stuff during class. And they're also a very good study aid, both short-term and long-term. You can use them to study for tests during the course and then help you review for the exams down the road. So, what does an ID have? Immediately, it should say who or what the term is. Immediately identify what that term is describing. Give a time frame. The more specific you can be, the better. If you only know a century, I guess that's okay. But if you can be specific down to about the year or at least the decade, that is better. You should most importantly, again, explain the importance of that term, of whatever it is, the person or the event, to the relative time period or the overall scope of history if that is appropriate. And I'll show you an example of both of those. So, what does a good ID look like? I'm going to use two examples here. One is U.S. history because I personally am more comfortable with AP U.S. history, and I'll also show you a world history example as well. Here is an ID term that I whipped up for George Washington, who I think everyone, even if you haven't taken U.S. history, is somewhat familiar with George Washington. George Washington was the first president of the United States from 1789 to 1797. So right there you immediately identified who he was and you've given a time frame. Prior to serving as president, he commanded the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. That's something else important that George Washington did during his life, obviously. Here comes the why. As president, he expanded the power of government and set numerous precedents that dictated how politicians and the government operated. That is why George Washington's presidency was so important, expanding the power of government. So right there you have the significance of George Washington. So this is what a good ID term looks like. You're typically going to have about 3 sentences or so. So here is a world history example of a good ID for William of Normandy. William of Normandy, sometimes called William the Conqueror, was the first Norman king of England. So there it is right there, who he was. After defeating Harold II at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, the last successful invasion of England. So right there, I've given the significance of William of Normandy for a broad scope of history, saying that, in 1,000 years now, England has not been invaded, so that's why William of Normandy is important. That's why he's significant. During his reign, he had the Domesday Book compiled to keep a record of all landholding in England, again, giving an important event or an important thing that William of Normandy did in that the Domesday Book helped keep a record of who was there and made tax collection more efficient. So this is how to write an effective AP level ID. Hopefully this will help you, and let your teacher know if you have any questions.